Hello everyone, welcome back. I am Fer and this is World Building Review. In this episode I want to talk about Horizon Zero Dawn because this game breaks the rule of show don't tell, and yet it gets away with it. It makes the game better. And also because I'm incredibly hyped about Forbidden West, which, by the way, should come out the day after I post this video. So if you're watching this, go check it out. It's probably gonna be great. The rule of show don't tell is basically one of the commandments of storytellers, and it is very self-explanatory. It means that whenever you put something in a story, you should show it to your audience instead of telling them about it. For example, in Star Wars, no one tells you that Darth Vader is scary. Instead, the movie shows you he is scary by how everyone reacts around him and the things he does. And of course, this also applies for world building. You should always show your audience all the elements of your world by how the creatures in it interact with that world, instead of just telling them about all of this cool stuff you have dreamed up. And of course, the writers of Horizon Zero Dawn, John Gonzalez and Ben McCaw, are masters of show don't tell. Originally, I wanted to give you many cool examples I noticed in the game, but I talked for over an hour and I didn't notice, so instead I'm just gonna give you one example: the throne room of the Sun King of the Karja. You and I grew up with this preconception of how the throne room of a king should be, because it is this long hall, right? And on one side are the doors, and in the other side is the king or queen sitting in his or her throne. And then to the sides of this hall are all the members of the court, all the people who are important in this kingdom, arranged by their status, prestige, and political power. And we imagine that when someone has an audience with the king, it is something public. They stand in the middle of this hall, in front of all the members of the court, but more importantly, in front of the monarch, and they present some kind of situation to the monarch, and the monarch makes some decision about it, and this decision, again, is public. Everyone hears it, everyone knows about it, and some few people that have high enough status, they can weigh in. They can say to the king, yes, I agree, no, I don't agree, or maybe the king can even ask them what should be done about it. The king can hear their different opinions, and they can reach a consensus. It is very similar to how courts work when you think about it. There is a person with a problem, a decision maker, and the decision maker makes a decision about that problem, and this decision is public. So this is an idea that is very ingrained in our culture and in many cultures across the world. But when Aloy goes to meet the Sun King of the Karja, she meets him at an open space and not in a big hall. This makes sense because the Karja worship the sun, and this is the Sun King, and all monarchies are at least a little bit theocratic. So, in this sense, the light of the sun serves as a reminder of the divine legitimacy of the Sun King. However, if you explore the rest of the palace, you will find that there isn't a place where the Karja King could be put on display like we are used to. Instead, the throne is behind a wall, and when Aloy finally goes to the other side of that wall, she is in a sort of balcony, and it is kinda narrow, so there isn't space for many people there. This means that when you get an audience with the Karja King, you can speak to him in private. You can say things that you wouldn't usually be able to say in public, and in turn, the king can reply things to you that he wouldn't be able to say in public. This is a monumental shift to how royal courts have worked in Europe and Asia for centuries, because in these countries, whenever you had an audience with the king, you were also talking with everyone else at court. It was something public, and thus it was prone to political manipulation. I cannot tell you how many Chinese generals were tricked by their rivals into accepting suicide missions because they couldn't question the emperor and they couldn't deny his orders in public. Something like that would never happen with the Karja because there's no one else talking to the king but you. However, this also makes this system a lot less transparent because, again, no one else knows what the king said to you or what you said to the king. It is even possible that the king might not keep his word, which is impossible in the other system. Once the king says something in front of his royal court, everyone knows what the king has decided and the king cannot back away. And so, yeah, the Karja system has pros and cons, but it's definitely very different, and it tells you a lot about their culture and how they think about politics and authority, and it does so without a single line of dialogue explaining it. It's just showing you with the environment, with the actions of the characters, with the way everything is arranged. This is a masterful example of show, don't tell. But of course, Horizon Zero Dawn also breaks this rule. So let's talk about that. Horizon Zero Dawn is a very interesting game because it has to tell two stories at the same time. The story of the past world and the story of the present world. And it tells those stories in very different ways. Telling the story of the present world is very straightforward. It's just what Aloy is doing and the people she is meeting. But to tell the story of the past world, it uses only exposition. Across the game, we go through several ruins, and in these ruins, we find documents we can read, audios we can listen, and holograms we can watch. And with these elements, the game tells us the story of how the world from the past was destroyed and then rebuilt. The game even seems to pause when we get to these ruins, because sure, before we can explore the ruins, we have to defeat a bunch of enemies and giant dinosaur robots, but once we do that, there are no more enemies until we finish that section. At most, there are a few platforming challenges here and there, but they aren't even that hard. All you have to do is just walk and read as many documents as you want, listen as many audios as you want, and then find the cutscenes and play them. And it was very important for the designers that you don't stop exploring these ruins and then go do something else until you have explored them completely. There's even one point in the game where they warn you that once you start this section, you have to finish it and you cannot go do anything else. And now, let me give you an extremely quick summary of what we learned in these sections. Basically, there was a machine apocalypse, but a bunch of people headed by the scientist Elizabeth Sobek created Gaia, an artificial intelligence that would wait until the machines had destroyed life on Earth, then she would hack them, then she would create her own machines and use them to terraform Earth, and then she would use embryos and DNA to basically resurrect life on Earth. But then, after the team had finished creating Gaia, they were betrayed, and Apollo, the part of Gaia that would teach the new humans science and history and everything else, was destroyed, and you are a clone of Elizabeth Sobek. That's pretty much it. When I explain it like that, it doesn't have a lot of emotional impact, does it? And yet, I want you to remember how you felt when you played the game. How did you feel when this general explained that all life on Earth would be destroyed by the robots? How did you feel when Elizabeth Sobek came into the hologram and she explained that they would create Gaia, Mother Nature made real, made conscious, and that she would resurrect life? How did you feel when you saw the holograms of the team leaders explaining how their projects would form part of Gaia? How did you feel when you learned that Apollo was destroyed and that all the team leaders were killed? I nearly cried. Like, it is emotionally so impactful to this day. Like, I played that game years ago, and when I remember it, I still feel it. It is such an epic story. It is so tragic. It is so compelling. Why? It is just exposition. None of that was shown to us. All of that was just told. And I just did the same. I told you pretty much the same core information. So then why is it that when I tell it, it doesn't have that emotional impact, but when the game tells it, it does? As it turns out, no human can really understand the end of the world. Take, for example, climate change. Sure, we understand it, we understand how it works, we understand the mechanism, but I don't think that any of us really understand what it means that we are at risk of leaving Earth uninhabitable. And that's not because we don't try, that's not because we don't care. That's because our brains, our minds, literally were not made to deal with problems that big. We don't have the emotional tools, the psychological elements to deal with such situations. This is why in superhero movies, whenever they are saving the world, it doesn't really feel that epic or important because our minds cannot comprehend what it means to save literally everyone. That's why most of these kinds of movies have some characters that we have a more intimate connection with, and those are being saved. For example, at the end of Spider-Man 2, Peter pretty much saved the world. The machine of Otto was going to continue to grow, and if it grew big enough, perhaps the water wouldn't have been enough to turn it off, and it would have consumed Manhattan, and then it would have continued consuming more and more, and it could have consumed the whole planet. But we don't remember that. We remember that Peter saved Mary Jane, and in a philosophical level, he also saved Otto Octavius. This means that even if Horizon Zero Dawn had shown us these soldiers fighting until the last one standing against those horrible machines just to gain Elizabeth Sobeck a few more minutes to complete Zero Dawn, we would not have felt what the story needed us to feel in that moment. Because even if we understand that those soldiers are fighting to save life itself in the universe, we don't have the mental tools to really feel that. And so the best that the game can do is just tell us this story. But, and this is the genius part, this story is told to us by the people living it. And in doing so, sure, they cannot show us the events these people are living, but they can show us how they feel about them. For example, when you see Elizabeth Sobeck explaining Gaia, she is enthusiastic, she is hopeful, and so are all the other team leaders. Whenever they explain their part of the job, their role, they are so excited. They make it sound fun. In fact, I think one of them, the creator of Apollo, she says that this is really fun. She laments the situation, but she is very happy to be working on such a project. And we can empathize with that. We can empathize with hope. Because having hope in the face of overwhelming odds is the one thing that all humans can empathize with. Even if we cannot really understand what it means to save the universe, we can understand what it means to have hope that you can save the universe, even when everything is against you. But none of the characters ever mention hope. None of them ever say that they are happy. No, all of this is shown to us by how they talk, by the words they use, by the tone of voice, and by their actions. The fact that they actually completed the Zero Dawn project. I think one of the best examples of this is actually the recording you find at the beginning of the game. This guy who recorded a hologram for the birthday of his son. Because then you realize that guy missed his son's birthday, his last birthday. There wouldn't be any more birthdays. That was it. And he knew that. He knew his son would never grow old. He knew no one else would. He knew that was it. That was the end of everything. And he was working every second, every minute of every day, so that people in the future could have a second chance, so that there could be fathers and sons in the future that could enjoy birthdays together the way he couldn't do it in that moment. And that hits you, because we understand sacrifice, we understand hope, we understand all those things. All of those things are shown to us. And so they don't show us the end of the world, because there's no point to it. We wouldn't understand it. They show us people having hope in the face of the end of the world. And it is one of the most powerful storytelling experiences I've had in years. Horizon Zero Dawn is amazing. It is great. So, sorry if I got a little emotional there, but that's the point. Now the question is, how can you use that? How can you use this knowledge when you are writing a book or making a video game or a movie or something else? Well, you might find that there are things in your story you cannot show, or that even if you show them, they don't have the emotional impact you would want them to. Perhaps your main character has a super tragic backstory, like, I don't know, maybe they had to eat their dog to survive, after their dog had saved them from a fire, and it only had 3 legs, and it was pregnant. And yeah, it is messed up, and you understand it must be sad, but you don't really feel sad, right? But what you can do is to show the audience the emotions your character feels about all of that. Maybe he has survivor's guilt, that he feels that he shouldn't have survived that. Or maybe he feels gratitude to this dog for saving him and for giving his life so that he could eat. And this is a gratitude that he feels he doesn't deserve. And it is a gratitude he can never pay off. And that feels a lot more compelling, doesn't it? Those are things that you can understand. Having guilt, having gratitude, having regrets. We can understand all of that, even if the situation is so messed up that no one can really empathize with it. Or if you can, like, I'm really sorry. In the case of world building, if you are making a realistic world, then that world is gonna have a lot of human tragedies, like genocides and wars. And maybe you cannot really show your audience the magnitude of these tragedies, but you can show them how people feel about them. Maybe what the survivors wrote about it. Maybe how these events are commemorated generations later. You can show them how these events change culture. And in this way, you can make your audience empathize with the people in your world, and you can make them get emotionally invested in it. And I guess that's it for today. That was the first episode of World Building Review. Did you like it? If so, give it a like. If not, give it a dislike. The button is still there, and I can see the dislikes, and I update the comments in my videos to show you how many they have. And also, please tell me in the comments which worlds you want me to review next. And of course, subscribe to see the videos I make reviewing those worlds. And of course, if you want to buy magic cards like this one, you can go to the link in the description. And as always, this video, like all my videos, is brought to you by my Patreons: Otto Motiosum, Matt Zweig, Daniel H. McGillivray, Marlo Brown, Valerie Hyde, David Saunders, and T. Highfield. All my Patreons, thanks 1,000 times, thanks 1,000,000 times.